All right, this is citizenship and immigration attorney Parviz Malakouti. Today is October 9th, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and this is our 40th mobility space. Today we're talking about the network versus nation-state territorial laws. And we have a real treat today. We're joined by our co-host, Olivier Roland of Disruptive Horizons. He's going to help us talk about some of these issues, and we're going to actually reference a paper, an interesting article that he wrote. So just as a reminder, if you haven't joined a space before, this is one of our 50 mobility spaces that we're doing this year. This is space number 40. Our spaces are on the hottest topics in dual citizenship, freedom of movement, sovereignty, and of course, passports. As a reminder, anybody is welcome to speak. If you want to speak, all you have to do is hit the request button. I'll approve it right away. You don't have to wait for an invitation. Feel free to just cannonball into the discussion if you have something to say, agree with, disagree with, whatever it may be. Now, getting back to the topic at hand here. So this space is titled Network versus Nation State Territorial Laws. And what I wanted to talk about in this space is this increasing tension that we're seeing. It's nothing that new. I'd say it's been around since at least the early 90s. But the issue is, with the advent of the internet, more and more things happen online. So first and foremost, speech and commerce. Okay, little by little, more and more happened online. Now we have a huge economy that's online. The problem is nation states are based primarily territorially, both in the hard power that they can exert, and then also in terms of the jurisdiction that they try to exert primarily. Nation states also, of course, freely exert jurisdiction, extraterritorial jurisdiction, especially over their own citizens and sometimes their residents. And of course, we'll talk about that as well. But we have a tension here, right? What law applies when things happen online, when you speak online, what speech law applies when you conduct transactions online, what law applies, and what happens when a nation state or nation states try to exert control over their residents or at least occupants within their territory borders, restrict them from accessing the internet, accessing them the network to be able to do all these types of things. Now, Olivier Roland of Disruptive Horizons saw a comment that I made, I think, under Preston Burns' tweet. Preston Burns is a First Amendment lawyer. He's a tech lawyer representing U.S. companies. And he actually posted this very interesting article that he wrote. It's called Elon Musk versus the Nation States. I have linked it underneath the post announcing this space. We're going to reference this article. The whole space isn't about the article, but we're going to be referencing this article throughout the space. And in this interesting article, which is pretty long, I think it's probably at least 2,000 words, Olivier Roland goes through Starlink and the effects of Starlink, and particularly the effects that it has now and can have in the future to bypass nation states over the control of the internet within its borders. Olivier makes a few interesting predictions in the paper as well that I'd like to ask him about to see how he thinks those things are going to play out. But I'd like to first start by introducing Olivier, and this is actually my first time speaking to him as well, too. So I'd like to know a little bit more about Olivier. So my first question to you, Olivier, is, or I guess not question, direction. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What Disruptive Horizons is a Substack. What exactly are the topics that you're most interested in that you write about in Disruptive Horizons? And thank you for joining. In the meantime, Patrick, let's talk a little bit ourselves. And I don't know if you had an opportunity, Patrick, to see Olivier's paper, Elon Musk versus the nation states. Excuse me. And Olivier makes a few predictions here, which I like. I like people who actually come down and don't just straddle the fence. And he definitely makes some predictions here. One of the predictions that he makes, which I will ask him about when he comes in, is he writes, so I predict the following. One day, Elon Musk will be so upset by a country that wants X/Twitter to censor content or that has blocked the social network outright that he will activate Starlink for that country outside any regulatory framework, allowing anyone to pay a subscription and connect to it via their smartphone or an easy-to-hide antenna. That's something I'm going to ask him about. I think we got Olivier back on. Mr. Olivier, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome,
Awesome.
welcome. Were you able to hear my intro?
Yeah, I did. I had I don't know, a
Wonderful.
problem. Yeah.
Wonderful. So thank you for joining us. Let's start off first. Let's hear a little bit about you. What tell us about you and what you do and the topics you write about.
Sure. So, I'm an entrepreneur. I have been since I'm 19. Actually, I dropped out of high school at 18 to start my first business. And I started an internet business in 2009. And so I have been a digital nomad for 15 years now. It's been 15 years I have been traveling the world 6 months a year, more or less. And 10 years since I left my native country of France. I lived three years in London, and now I have been 7 years in Dubai. Um, and it means I really explored from within the world of digital nomads. And also I could see with my own eyes how the mobility that an internet business gives to people really disrupt the state, because one of the reasons why I left France is because I was really fed up with the really high taxes and the poor services um, I got in exchange. And so basically, I decided to explore the world to see if I could find a better bargain, which I found, especially in Dubai. So I wrote a book like 9 years ago in French that was a bestseller. It was a criticisms of the education system and why it is not suited to entrepreneurs and how you can educate yourself throughout your life. And I got the idea to extend these criticisms of the education system to the very structure of the nation state, um, and to explore how the nation state is being disrupted today by internet and globalization. So the Substack that you are referring to is actually a collection of extracts from my book that was published just a few months ago in French.
Wonderful. Congratulations on publishing that book. There's so many interesting subtopics to discuss regarding the disruption of the nation state by the internet. We probably have to extend these spaces, to talk over a couple. But let's focus. Let's hone in on speech and access to speech. So. This article, which I know now is an extract from the book, Elon Musk versus the nation states, is it fair to say, Olivier, that the main thesis of this is that nation states are losing and eventually going to lose the ability to control people within their borders from accessing the internet?
Well, the whole like the foundation thesis of my book is that there is a war right now between the state and the network, and not the only one who say that. Obviously, Balaji in the network state says the same. For example, I was also inspired by the book The Sovereign Individual that was published in 1997. Um, but basically, I think, yeah, there is a war between the state and the network. Right now, the state is more powerful, but is descending while the network is ascending. And at some point in the future, I do think that the network will win, but it's not a given, it's not automatic. And but there are many like advantages that the network has over the state. So on the specific of communication, I mean, except in a few countries like China, you can already argue that the state already lost a lot of control about speech and communication on their territory. Because, I mean, many countries like they try to censor internet, they try to blacklist some websites, some services. But as anyone knows, it's very easy to circumvent this kind of censorship with VPNs, with Tor, and other device. For example, I live in Dubai. I've been living here for 7 years, and I mean, I feel more free in Dubai than in my home country of France for many different reasons. But there is one service, for example, that you cannot access freely here is you cannot do WhatsApp calls. You can send WhatsApp messages, but you cannot do calls because I mean, this is basically the government says you need to like telecommunication services needs to have a license, and the police needs to be able to check the communication, blah blah blah. And so, it's not that I know a few people who use VPNs. It's like I don't know anyone in Dubai who doesn't use a VPN. It's like it is a country where I've seen the biggest like percentage of people who use VPN. I think it's 100%, honestly. I never met anyone who doesn't use a VPN. And people use VPNs all the time to, especially to do calls, WhatsApp calls, but also to, access websites that will be censored. And it's very illegal. It's very you can like be sentenced for a few months of jail or be given very high fines. But it's like it's a false secret. I don't know how to say that in English, but like it's like a secret that everyone knows it's not a secret. You know what I mean? And basically, the government turns a blind eye on it. And so you can already argue that it's very hard for states to really control like that communications. They do have one big tool they can use, and many people, many countries use it regularly, is to shut down completely internet access. And against these, there is a possibility, and it's one of the points of my article, that in the future, satellite access is going to help people to circumvent this kind of censorship. Already in Iran, Starship is operating with the authorization of the US government, and Iranians can, get a Starlink dish and like antenna and a subscription and have access to uncensored internet. And Iran like complained a few months ago to the UN about this. So it's already the case, and with satellite access, it's going to be even harder for states to be able to control this.
Very interesting. We know nation states, or really entities, any entities with power, don't tend to just lie down and let their power be whittled around. Usually, at least I believe, they react. They do something in order to try to stem the flow or regain the power. So we typically have a kind of a dynamic back and forth, right? One dynamic shifts freedom to one side, and then the losing entity reacts in some way, etc. Do you have any views or predictions or thoughts about how you think about how the nation state is going to react to people trying to access networks, satellites within their borders outside of a nation state regulatory framework?
Yeah, so the first thing is obviously they're going to ban, and they already do, right? Any communication that is not approved by the state. But as you say, then what happens outside of the regulatory landscape is first, of course, they will try to like scare the users, like they do in Dubai, for example. So with heavy fines and maybe jail also. Certainly in countries like Iran, it's possible, right? Another way for the countries to try to control these is to, I mean, the basic of the power of the state is, as you said in your intro, is like it's basically the monopoly of violence. If someone doesn't comply, you can just send a police officer armed with a gun to force the guy to comply. Yes, but what happens when the guy lives in a place where you cannot send a police officer with a gun? Well, one of the possibilities is like you will force the entity you want to control to have some people on your territory so you can send some armed police officer to make sure that the people understand the regulation. So, for example, it happened in Brazil. I speak about these episodes in my article, which was published like 1 year ago, more or less. Basically. There was a battle in Brazil between the judge Moraves and Elon Musk. Moraves asked X slash Twitter to censor some accounts, and Elon Musk disagreed because some of the people that Moraves asked that X censored were not living in Brazil, and Elon Musk felt that Moraves was overstepping his power. So basically, he said no. Then Moraves started to threaten the director of Twitter Brazil with jail, which is what states do usually, right? And so what did Musk did? He said, okay, fine, I'm firing this person, and from now on, there is no physical incarnation of Twitter in Brazil.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Go
right?
ahead, Olivier.
Yeah, I mean, here you can see a very interesting way of how the state and the network are battling. Basically, the network doesn't have to be physically anywhere, really, right? Yes, you need the people needs to be somewhere. Yeah, the equipment needs to be somewhere, but it doesn't have to be where the state wants you to be. You can basically choose your physical incarnation, which gives a lot of power to the network and its representatives, right? But one of the way of the state to battle the network is to force the network to incarnate physically where the state has power. And when you understand this framework, you will see it everywhere. And then Moraves said, okay, fine. We will fine you every day this amount until you nominate again a physical representative of Twitter in Brazil. And if they want to pay the fine, well, we'll also forbid SpaceX. We'll also fine SpaceX. So SpaceX, we agree, is a completely different company. So we can see, like, it's not a joke when Musk was thinking Moraves was overstepping his power. I mean, Moraves find a completely different company that is unrelated to X just because this company has the same founder, the same CEO, not the same founder, the same CEO. And so basically, long story short, Elon Musk lost this particular battle. He caved in. He said, all right, I'm going to pay the fine. All right, I'm going to nominate a physical representative. Okay, I'm going to censor the accounts that this guy wants. So in this case, the network lost the battle. And it happens a lot of time, right? But also in a lot of other cases, the networks win. So for example, recently there was like a big uprising of people in Nepal. And what really triggered this is like the government of Nepal, the state of Nepal, decided that all the social medias, and we see again the same playbook being played, right? That all social medias needed to have a physical representative in Nepal. And why? Because in the month that preceded this decision, especially on TikTok, but also on other social media, there was a lot of videos being shared of the incredible lifestyle that the son and daughter of official governments have compared to the miserable life of the people of Nepal, right? And basically, the government wanted to control these. And so they told the social media, okay, you have a few months, you have like, I don't remember exactly, but like 6 months to register, to open a physical office, and we want representative on our territory. And what happened? No social media did that. Obviously, Nepal is such a small and poor country. I'm not even sure they were aware of this regulation, right? So no, but absolutely no social media accepted this. And so what the government did, the government banned 26 social medias. And I mean, everything, right? YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp, TikTok, every social media you can think of was banned. Like the government asked the internet providers to blacklist these services. And what happened is very interesting. What happened? Basically, the population revolted. And we see here a very interesting example. I think it's the first time in history that we see a population revolting to defend the network against the state. And basically, the government lost. And now, like in one day, in 24 hours, they changed their mind. They said, okay, we're going to accept social medias again. But it was not enough. The revolt continued and the government was toppled. And apparently, the new prime minister was elected through a survey on Discord, which I think, is a first. It's a worldwide first. And now a new government is going to be elected. Is it for better or worse? Time will tell. But it's very interesting to see that here the population sided with the network against the state.
No, absolutely. I think the key insight when you're talking about this tension between network versus territorial nation state is that the network can be anywhere or everywhere, or maybe it's not even. I mean, depending on your viewpoint, maybe its location has no relationship to terrestrial borders. But the person, the individual, has to be somewhere, and you alluded to that just a moment ago. So I say this kind of more bluntly as your actions can be anywhere, but your rear end has to be somewhere. I think that's the key point, right? Because generally, the way in the accepted, let's say, international and domestic nation state legal system, generally it's accepted that a country has jurisdiction over things that happen within its borders, okay, and it can enforce that through hard power, as you said, through violence, right? And then also, it's generally understood that or accepted that nation states have some jurisdiction over their citizens abroad as well as their legal permanent residents. Now, that last point might be accepted legally on a legal level, but for that nation state to actually exercise that jurisdiction through force, it requires cooperation, right? Typically with another nation state, right? Because if you're trying to reach into a foreign country to extradite and charge somebody that you claim did something on your territory, you generally need the cooperation, or at very least non-interference, let's say tacit approval of that nation state. This to me, so I'm a citizenship and immigration lawyer, as I introduced at the beginning. This is to me the key insight on an individual level. So for people who are trying to live the sovereign individual thesis, it's understanding that your attack vector, the main attack vector, is on you physically, you as a person, right? Now,
Yeah.
there's a couple things, right? So when I first started getting, I guess, I don't know, for lack of a better term, more interested in these topics. The first way I thought about this is, okay, to escape nation state control, at least hard control, right? You have to move around. You have to, or be able to move around, not necessarily moving around, but be able to. I still believe that's the case. Okay. I read a book a few years ago which added another element that I had not thought about that much. And maybe, Olivia, you've already read it, or maybe you already kind of have this insight. It was Seeing Like a State by James C. Scott. And in that,
Yeah, I read it.
you read it. Okay. That book introduced to me for the first time this area that he calls Zomia. So, what he calls Zomia is this area that includes, not all of, but includes parts of Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, India, China. The author draws this area. It includes about 200 million people in it. And the point is, this is the area that, according to this author, people, even though they're located physically within nation state borders, they've largely escaped centralized nation state control because it's just very difficult for nation state law enforcement to actually impose its will in that area. And there's a lot of reasons that he says why that's the case. One of the main reasons is just the terrain. Okay, some of the terrain makes it inaccessible or just implausible, impractical for nation states to kind of exert the control that they have. But the point is that's another piece of wiggle room, right? If you're thinking about this from the individual perspective, the sovereign individual or the aspiring sovereign individual, right? I think as the nation state gets more, first of all, I agree with your thesis that the nation state in some ways and largely and unevenly but largely is already losing control to the network. I agree with that. What I think is going to happen and what I believe is we're seeing the beginnings of happening and going to happen increasingly is that an increasingly desperate nation state is going to try to exert control as it can, which is over the corpus, over the physical, I think you said the physical incarnation of people within its borders. Companies too, but remember, companies are ephemeral, right? They're not. Companies are made of or made by individuals, right? If you really want to control some human behavior, there's no bigger cudgel than either locking somebody else, somebody up in prison, or the threat of locking somebody up in prison. So I see the attack vector increasingly being on the individual, to which I see the natural response as being, okay, well, attain maximum freedom of movement, as much what I call robust freedom of movement as possible. What I mean by robust, Olivier, is a strong ability to enter or exit, okay, right? Because not all abilities to enter a country are created equally. A citizen doesn't have the same strength of entrance as a tourist, for example. I think most people on this call understand that, at least implicitly. So that's kind of the way I see it. I want to throw the same question, back to you, Olivier, which is, from a individual perspective, and it sounds like you're a disciple of the sovereign individual. From an individual perspective, how do people that are trying to navigate nowadays have maximum freedom, okay, and ride this wave, okay, of increased power of the network, decreased power of the nation state? What should they do to set themselves up, okay, to protect themselves?
Yeah. First, yeah, I agree that basically the states are going to fight back. You know, I start my book actually with 10 principles that we can learn from history, and one of the principle is like a power that is losing its power is always fighting back, even if the odds are not in its favor. Like history shows it again, again, and again. And so, yes, I completely agree, and we will see, like, in this one of the battle between the state and the network is arrest of Pavel Durov in France. Here you see a nation state using like its typical playbook uh, try to force an incarnation of the network to comply to its request, even though there was no physical incarnation of Telegram in France. But because the founder and CEO happened to be in France, too bad for you. We have a few questions for you. And now the poor guy, he was allowed to come back to Dubai, but he needs to come back to France every 2 weeks, and he cannot go to any other country. So he can only go to France and the UAE. And it's one of the way that the state are going to fight back. And I mean, honestly, I don't pretend to know everything in this case, but from what I can see, it's really ludicrous to what happened. I mean, it's like France, the French administration is basically holding Durov accountable for everything that happened on the platform. So if it's true, why don't you arrest Macron every time there is a crime in France? I mean, it's a bit ridiculous, right? So to answer your question, how to do people can have maximum freedom in this new world? Well, um, you need to understand that the network is ascending and the state is descending. So it means it's better, to, I mean, to pledge allegiance to this network instead of the state. And what do I mean by that is first, you need to digitalize yourself as much as possible because having a web business or a source of income that you can earn from anywhere is giving you so much freedom. It's like ridiculous, because suddenly you break you're free to go wherever you want. And instead of being the subject of one monopoly of governance, you become a customer in a market of governance servicing providers that fight to attract you. And just these completely change your status. And for me, the same thing that people who lived in communist country, for example, in Eastern Europe, experienced when their country opened to capitalism. Before, they were waiting a few hours in line to get a bad bread. And then after, they could go to any supermarket and the bread was waiting in line for them. And with a variety and quality that was absolutely impossible before during communism. And it's the same thing here. When suddenly you don't need to be somewhere, you can choose where you will incarnate yourself and also where you can incarnate your business. Well, you have so many possibilities. You can make basically the states compete for you. And it's, I mean, I'm still mind blown by that. I've been living this life as a customer of jurisdiction for 10 years, and then I'm still blown away by how much my life dramatically improved once I started to use this to my own advantage, like a customer, you know? So pledge allegiance to the network by being network first. It means also your source of income or your sources of income. And understand that you don't need to be somewhere. Now, you can have emotional attachment to a place, to the people you know, and I understand that, but, I'm from France. France is in the top 3 of the most taxed countries in the world since 1960, meaning since we started measuring these kind of things. And honestly, as a French citizen, I can say it's really easy to find a better price quality ratio elsewhere. Okay, and it's not only about that, but you can not only have a better governance services for a better price, but also more freedom from overreaching states. So try to be internet first, embrace this mobility that this new world is giving it to you, and explore the world also to understand that there are so many places in the world. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of places with a better combination of great lifestyle, sunshine, amazing food, low cost of living, lower taxes than the place where you were born. Because, I mean, there are like 190 countries, something like this. And if you count the state in federations, probably we have like 300 or 400 jurisdictions in the world, something like this. So it would be really like amazing luck that by pure chance, the place where you were born is the best place with the best combination of all these factors for you, And obviously, when I'm not sure if our listeners are mostly Americans or not. When you're American, it's a bit different, right? Because when you're American, you're a bit like the property of your state, and you're a bit in jail wherever you go, right? So, but this is another kind of form. I don't know. I'm not sure we want to explore these today.
More than a bit. You're more than a bit in jail wherever you go, just to clarify that.
Yeah, we probably
Yeah.
have at least 50% American listeners on these spaces, Olivier.
All right. Yeah. And I mean, one of the predictions of the book, The Sovereign Individual, is like the US will stop its citizenship-based taxation at some point because this new world will force the US to do it.
So walk us through how that happens. I'm sure many listeners would sincerely love to hear that.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the US. I've been to the US like 35 times in 15 years. I'm part of an American mastermind. Most of my mentors are American. I mean, I love the US culture. I love the US. But I'm so glad. I'm so glad I'm not American. Sorry, guys. Because
We understand.
Yeah, just because of this. I mean, just because of this, I think citizenship-based taxation is absolutely horrible. It's a new feudalisms, during feudalisms, you were kind of the property of your lord, and you needed his permission to leave the territory. And it's a bit like the same here, and I think it's really, I don't understand how the country of freedom can do something like this.
I don't know, but we're working to undo it. I know Inverted and I and Patrick, we also interface and do a lot of spaces with John Richardson and Anthony Parent. These are U.S. based attorneys, huge advocates for undoing citizenship-based taxation. So anybody, shout out to them. Anybody listening to this that doesn't already follow them, these guys are at the tip of the spear in the U.S. as far as trying to undo the citizenship-based taxation in the United States. Um, Olivier, so you gave a lot. You gave a lot of info there. There's a lot to unpack. Privacy, right? I think everybody knows on some level privacy is important. Is privacy the new battleground? Okay, for nation states, for descending nation states to try to reassert some control. And if we look at your Elon Musk example, for example, Elon Musk, richest man in the world, everybody knows who he is. He's highly, publicly associated with his companies. But let's consider an alternate universe where it wasn't public information that he also was the creator of, the founder of SpaceX, and he still, and let's say he had this showdown with Alexandre what's his name? It's not Dumas. I'm thinking French. Moraes. I'm thinking about one of your great authors of years past. In that alternate universe, right? If somehow Musk would have been could be private with those other companies, would he have ended with the upper hand against Moraes? You think, or not really?
If he will have what companies?
If it wasn't publicly known, if Moraes and others didn't know that he has an association with these other countries, with these other companies that could not remove their physical incarnation in Brazil, would it have been a different story in your opinion? Hypothetically.
Well, let's imagine that SpaceX didn't have any presence in Brazil, which was not the case. Then, yeah, it would have been very interesting to see what would have happened. Well, I mean, what happened is like that Brazil blacklist Twitter, so people could not access Twitter anymore. Of course, you could use a VPN, but then obviously Moraes basically said, "Hey, now the fine, if for anyone using VPNs for illegal purposes, it was very like $2,000 or something like this, which in Brazil is huge, right? Per violation." And obviously, the problem with Twitter is like if you're Brazilian and you post on Twitter, it's really easy to see you were in Brazil, right? At this time, and then there is a proof you've violated the law. But if you just consult passively, well, it's really hard to really say, right? So it's a good question. In the end, right now, it's still a very big power that the state has to cut internet access to certain services. It's very big. And when it happened in Brazil, it just lasted a few days before Elon Musk caved in. But the usage of X in Brazil really was very low, and the usage of Blue Sky really exploded. So it's still a power. Maybe Elon Musk could have asked SpaceX to continue to provide free services to everyone in Brazil, but then back then you needed an antenna for the service. So I think it was too early, and in any case, probably Elon Musk would have conceded defeat. But in 5 or 10 years, I think the story will be very different.
It seemed,
especially
sorry, go ahead.
because I don't know if you saw this, but just like 1 month ago, SpaceX bought a license to be able to broadcast directly from space, from the satellites to smartphones. They already have a direct cell to satellite service through T-Mobile in the US, but it's very basic. You can do much, but now they have the frequency to do it by themselves. I think they need the phones to have to update their chip or maybe to build new chips. But SpaceX is one of the companies that could easily negotiate with phone builders to implement these. And so in a few years, we can envision SpaceX being a worldwide service provider with direct cell to satellite service, and in this case going to be very, very hard to censor and to stop. And if another state is trying to censor X, that's one of the predictions I make in this article, I think is going to be very, very hard for the state to win. There was actually an article published in the Washington Post just a few days ago. Elon Musk's latest paragraph points in a clear direction. And the subtitle is SpaceX deal could fundamentally alter the relationship between a state and its citizen. And this article explores this point of view too. And it's very interesting. I'm going to share it right now in the comment under the space.
It seems like essentially the question becomes, at what point in time for a given piece of infrastructure, be it financial or political, or in this case, social media or the internet itself, at what point in time a given piece of infrastructure, technology catches up, let's say, to a point where the state loses control of a given thing that allows it to keep its power, until they event.
Well, in Nepal, it already happened.
Yeah, certainly.
But Nepal was not powerful enough to matter
Right.
for the
That's
social medias.
right.
Brazil is a different story, right? So, but you can see already all the small states, they are already powerless.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I was going to say, but that's kind of where it leads us. It's like kind of eventually you get to the big actors in the world, whether it be individuals that are powerful or believe themselves powerful enough to be on like Elon's level or something, or the actual large countries going head to head with themselves at the moment, perhaps the East versus the West. But in the financial sense, that leads us like the crypto conversation. I mean, that is really interesting, because I would argue that's probably the last on-ramp, off-ramp that the nation state is willing to let go of. And I would assume they will only let go of it when a network state pries it from its cold, dead hands. What do you think about that?
Well, yes. And what is so interesting about SpaceX too, it's not only calls and messages. When you have uncensored internet access, it means also now uncensored access to cryptocurrencies. So it means also a direct phone to satellite access will make states lose also control on their money, especially now with the stablecoins being given a good raise by the Genius Act and stuff. Balaji said recently, and I completely agree with him, that now with cryptocurrencies, the same thing that happened to newspaper will happen to currencies, because before newspaper had a moat, they had basically a geographic monopoly, and it was really hard to beat them. And then the internet happened, and their geographic monopoly broke. And now with cryptocurrencies and unlimited access to an uncensored internet, it's the same. The national currencies are losing their monopoly right now. And you can already see it in a few countries where stablecoins and bitcoins are more used than the national currency, like in Nigeria. And when you put Starlink on top of that, you can see a future in just a few years where not only states will lose control of their communication, but also of their money.
Well, but
And it's very disruptive.
But would you include in that statement the G7? Because if you said that, okay, for example, the stable coins are going to kill all currencies except for the G7. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah. No, obviously, the most powerful states are still powerful.
Right.
And I do think in the aggregate, they are more powerful than the network now.
Right.
But what we see with weaker states is probably what we'll see with stronger states in the future when the network will be stronger.
Well, that's the irony. It's like we, of course, want wherever we live to be successful, whatever. We don't want to live in a place that's falling apart. But the irony is that in reality, we should probably be rooting for the degradation of the centralized state because that probably is what is required to get to any sort of network state, at least to some extent. And there's a bit of a paradox there, maybe.
I'm not sure. I mean, I do think the state is it's a descending power, is going to lose against the network, even though there is a possibility that it will win in the end, right? I mean, technology right now favorizes decentralization, while in the 20th century it favorized centralization. But in certain ways, technology also favors mass surveillance, censorship, and one of the way that states could react is to follow China's model, right? Because China is the only country in the world with effective internet censorship. But maybe Starlink is going to disrupt this monopoly. We'll see.
Well, and even China, they do arguably the best in the world at keeping control of what was within their borders, but they really don't have that much control outside their borders, at least compared to a nation like the US, which exerts extreme control relatively outside of their borders. It's interesting.
True. And we can also see that since the Trump administration took power, it really accelerated the power of the network, the rise of the power of the network. So to have the most powerful nation state with the network also helps the network, right? And the US is doing that because obviously the government right now, the administration think it's in their own interest to help the network because the network is mostly American. I mean, it's mostly American built, and stablecoins are based on the US dollar, etc., etc. But we'll see in the end how it will play out. I think it's basically, I think it's probably the smartest move right now to do for the US because the Biden administration tried to fight the network and it lost, right? But in the end, maybe the US is also creating its biggest competitor, or maybe its biggest partner. You know, Balaji said, and I agree with him, like US was Britain 2.0, and the internet is the US 2.0. So maybe the internet is going to be to the US what the US was to the UK.
It's really interesting.
A continuation of the principles in a better way.
I could see that.
Olivier, I want to ask you about a prediction you made in the article. You wrote, so I predict the following one day. Elon Musk will be so upset by a country that wants X/Twitter to censor content or that has backed the social network outright that he will activate Starlink for that country outside any regulatory framework, allowing anyone to pay a subscription and connect to it via their smartphone or an easy to hide antenna. And I think you wrote that you give that 50% chance of happening in 2040. Follow-up question. First of all, do you still hold that prediction? And then secondly, how do you see it happening? Who's most likely? What countries are most likely, you think, for this to happen to?
Yeah, I still so yeah, I wrote the article 1 year ago. At the time, my prediction was 50% chance. Now I think it's like 60%. Why? Because SpaceX bought these license. And I mean, the same day that the announcement was made that SpaceX was buying this license, Elon Musk posted a tweet, "You'll thank me later." And I mean, I studied Elon quite a bit. I think and I understand him. When he say that, he's speaking about "you'll thank me later" because what I'm doing now is to protect freedom of speech in the future. So I think he's already positioning his pieces to fight exactly this kind of case where a country will overstep in his mind, and do a request that he will not like what happened in Brazil last year. He lost in Brazil. I think he learned from this, and he wants to win in the future. I'm going to post a link to his tweet. Right, yeah, I just posted it in the comments under the space. So yeah, I do think it's gonna happen. I mean, 60% chance, right? Maybe 70 right now, right? There is a reason why SpaceX bought this license, And when you look at what Elon Musk does, everything has a reason, and everything is part of a grand plan to save humanity. Now, Elon Musk can be wrong. Elon Musk can do stuff for the wrong reasons and blah, blah, blah. But still, at the heart, he wants to save humanity from what he perceives as big dangers. So he wants to colonize Mars so we have a backup. He wants to be the first to reach AGI, so it's a good AGI. And he wants to protect freedom of speech because he thinks, maybe it's conception of freedom of speech, right? We can debate about that, but he wants to defend that. And obviously what he's doing with Starlink is one way to help the cause.
Buying a license for a radio frequency in a country that's operating within the country's regulatory framework, right? So I guess I don't understand.
But
Go ahead.
It's a first step. It's a first step because once he has that, then he can go to any phone maker and says, "Hey, now we have the license. We want you to include in your chip the possibility to communicate directly with our satellite using this license." So obviously, when Apple and the Android makers are going to put that in their phone just for the US, guess what? They're not going to do a different version of this phone for the rest of the world, right? So every phone in the world will have this chip. So yes, he starts with a license, but then he has the technological possibility to communicate directly with cell phones everywhere on the planet without, the license is just a technicality. Physically, he will be able to do it if he wants. You see? So one day, if a country really upsets him, he will say, okay, from now on, free internet for everyone in this country from a cell phone, and good luck for any government to try to counter that. It's not possible, right? They will need to basically confiscate the smartphones of everyone, and then it's going to be a Nepalese revolution multiplied by 10, right? Because try to take the smartphones of people nowadays, right? You cannot live a normal life without that, without these tools.
Right.
Olivier, how do you see this playing out for the smaller countries as the centralized power, the government, loses its ability to just, let's say, even keep control of things necessarily? Do you see smaller nations banding together, or presumably the larger nations will keep control of things at least for a little bit, the various ways that they can? But like you said, Nepal, this is a good example. As the formal government becomes almost irrelevant, perhaps you could say, in a way, what happens with the smaller nations, in your view?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, we had a glimpse of the future in Nepal. The smaller nations will be basically vassals of the network, meaning if they try to censor the network too much, the population will revolt. Or Elon Musk will side with the population, and in any way, the population will have uncensored access to the internet. So it means the governments will have to live with a free internet, and they will have to live with the consequences.
Well, a certain degree of freedom generally, because it implies that the network can check the state in a way, in a really important way. Your example with the vassal is really interesting. It's like, you have someone that can go run off and tell the caretaker if things get too bad, but essentially the formal state is just kind of in place in case, so to speak.
Olivier,
Yeah.
Sorry, just question. I probably should have asked this question at the beginning. When you refer to network or the network or networks, are you referring primarily to the accumulation of individuals who are connected, or are you referring to some sort of centralized, albeit borderless, nation that has some sort of hierarchy of control?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. I speak about it in the abstract, and I take this concept from Balaji in his book, The Network State. So basically, Balaji says in this book that there is, I mean, the Middle Ages in Europe was an age where there was a battle between the Leviathan state and the Leviathan God slash church. And the church was more powerful than the state during the Middle Ages. From the Renaissance, the state started to be more powerful than the church. Okay, and now we enter a new world where a new Leviathan is rising, which is a network. And so it's the same story of what happened between the church and the state, except this time it's the state and the network. It's basically an alternative source of power that disrupt the old power and is with one descending and the other rising. So it's an abstract, but basically it means the internet and all the power it can give to individuals and companies. So I wrote about maybe 10 or 11 disruptions that the internet have against the state. So for example, the fact that I'm French, I live in Dubai, I have an internet company, I sell to French-speaking customers. So many of my customers are in France, Belgium, Switzerland, Canada, but I don't pay taxes in any of these states. I pay taxes in Dubai, meaning I'm very low taxed. It's very, very disruptive for the states. The society in modern nation states was not built with people like me in mind, because until very recently, it was not possible to do what I do now. Also, another disruption, this time of the nation and not of the state. Like just a few decades ago, like maybe even 20 or 30 years ago, most people were watching mostly the same TV shows, the same news, they were reading the same newspaper. Like people in one city would read the newspaper of the city, maybe one national newspaper, and culture was less fragmented. People were sharing more common references. But nowadays, nobody's watching the same things. Everyone is in his own like algorithmic bubble, right? To try to find a lot of people who watch the exact same YouTube shows as you. Good luck. Right, but a few decades ago it was not hard to find people who were watching the same TV shows as you. So it's just one of the other disruptions, and there are dozens basically, right? So this nation state as a structure, which is very recent in history, it has maybe 200 years, right, is attacked on all fronts by the network and also globalization. So that's what I mean by the network.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for the clarification. Olivia, I would say it's difficult to find people who have shared consumption geographically next to you. I think that's the difference. But there are people. I mean, I look at the participants in the space. Inverted, Patrick. We're all following kind of the same people, and we show up in the same spaces, right? But we're separated geographically. I think that's the delta. That's the change. And of course, the sovereign
Absolutely.
individual wrote about this. You can still find your affinity. It's just not not your neighbor next to you who watched the same news program, read the same newspaper, etc.
Yeah, and it's also one of the disruptions.
Exactly.
Because before you felt connected to your neighbors, to your city, to
Right.
your country, and you still do today, but less.
That's
And
right.
some people, they feel more connected to an online community, and they don't even know where the people of this community are, right? And probably most of them are outside of the country. They feel more connected to this community than to their neighbor, who is a plumber and has nothing in common except to be the same citizen of the same nation. Right, and it's also very disruptive.
Absolutely, absolutely. Perhaps this is a leading question, but would you say the linchpin of your ability to execute what you do now, French citizen, living in Dubai, internet company, is the fact that you were able to physically uproot and cross a border and move into Dubai?
What do you mean by linchpin? I don't understand.
Linchpin, meaning the critical
Linchpin.
factor that if it was absent would make this impossible.
I mean, the critical factors are basically an internet source of income and not being American. I mean, you can still improve situation being an American and going abroad, because you still have 120K of tax-free income you can have, right? Which for most people is a lot.
Earned
Uh,
income. Earned income.
Earned income. Okay.
Yeah.
But obviously you can, I mean, your optionalities to optimize are way less. So the two factors are not being American and have an internet source of income. And the third is also being able to
Olivier, I
move, but they
can't hear
don't.
you. You cut out for me. Can you just repeat that last 10 seconds?
Yes. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying three factors: not being American, having an internet source of income, and also being willing to leave your country. Because many people have the theoretical ability to leave, but they don't, because they are afraid, or they don't want to lose their friends, or they don't want to quit their family. I mean, some of the reasons are good, you know, but you need to be willing to leave, to be able to plead allegiance to the network.
Would you say a fourth is potentially at least the tacit, implicit allowance by the current system for you to have source income in Dubai but sell into France, et cetera, et cetera? Like the fact that the tax system and the international system exists the way it does and allows us to arbitrage the way we do, like there isn't, I mean, if you and I sat down, I bet you we could figure out how to slow you and I down, right? Like it's not like it's impossible. It's just we figured out how to optimize within a given system. So the fact that the system doesn't or hasn't changed yet, I think is an act of benevolence in a way, at least I would argue.
I don't think it's an active benevolence. I think it's a failure of coordination. I really, it's a very good question, and I really studied this deeply for my book, how the nation state could coordinate to fight this, because a nation state by itself, even the US, cannot win against this. Actually, I also studied FATCA and the efficiency of FATCA for the US tax citizenship. And without the fines that the banks pay, it will cost way more than what it brings.
Oh, of
So
course. That's true
FATCA
of
by itself
most
is a failure.
that's
Yeah.
that's true of most US systems. They don't bring in, oh, I mean, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So even the US cannot fight this alone. It's not possible. So the state needs to coordinate themselves, but it's very, very hard. And I mean, you just look at to try to predict what will happen. You just need game theory, and you need to look at what is the destiny of cartels, of international cartels,
Right.
because it's a cartel.
100%.
They are trying to create a cartel to fight the competition. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, I mean,
And
you're a Frenchman. If the international tax treaty system didn't exist the way it was right now, France would already be trying to impose citizenship-based taxation on you, arguably.
uh, yes and no. Yes, it's true. But in Dubai, the tax treaty between the UAE and France is very interesting because it only protects Emirati citizen. So I'm not a
Right.
citizen, I'm a resident.
I meant the French tax treaty that they have with everyone doesn't allow citizenship-based
Yes, no,
taxation to currently
this is true.
exist.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. There is a far left presidential candidate in France Jean-Luc Mélenchon, he has been talking about doing a taxation
Right.
based on citizenship for like 15 years. And there was a study by the National Assembly in 2019 who wrote a 92 pages report about the possibility of France doing the same as the US. And long story short, the report says not possible. 4 main reasons. First, well, it will not work in Europe, in the EU, not in Europe, in the EU, because, well, it will go against the freedom of circulation of people.
Right.
So even if France could do this for the outside of the EU, it will still open loopholes in 26 countries, right? Second is France is not as powerful as the US, so it's going to be hard to negotiate these, which is good news because every country in the world is less powerful than the US, right? And third, even if, let's say, France managed to do it, they will need to renegotiate every tax treaty with, and they have like 130 more or less, which will take more than a decade. And it's not even sure that it will bring more than what it will cost because the countries will want something else in exchange, right? And the fourth is like even the US, it costs them more than what it brings, so there is no point. But the real danger is like if the countries coordinate and just look. So you can look at a cartel like the OPEC, the cartel of oil producers, and you can see it's very unstable long term. You all have countries that defect, you have technological disruptions and these kind of things. And also the OECD is trying to do that. Have you heard of the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 system?
Right. Well, and it's backfiring in their face, and everyone's just putting 15 as a max, hilariously.
Ex exactly. And I mean, the Pillar 1 is dead. Pillar 1 will probably never be enacted. And Pillar 2 was enacted, but is dead in the water. Now the US managed to negotiate an exemption. And I mean, only the EU really voted this into law. But the Germany, which is the most powerful and influential country in the EU, is already saying, guys, with the US exception, it doesn't make sense anymore. We don't want our EU companies to be more taxed than the US ones. And let's just drop the whole system. My point is, it's very, very hard to coordinate dozens of countries because every country has different interests, and we can see it. And when you look at game theory, I'm not optimistic that we'll be able to do it. So it's not benevolence. It's like it's so hard to coordinate that they are fighting a uphill battle.
Yeah, I want to weigh in on this for a moment. You took the words right out of my mouth at the beginning of your answer, Olivier. I think it's a lack of coordination as opposed to an act of benevolence. Game theory comes to mind. I think of this as a form of reverse prisoner's dilemma. It just takes a few countries to opt out of any type of coordination in order for people to have access to the network, provided that the person can have access to those countries, right? So I see this as reverse prisoner's dilemma, right? If 193 plus countries got together and everybody stayed firm, okay, they could have a universal minimal tax, they could cut off access to the network, and they could each be better off for it. But I just don't think that. I think the chances of that happening are very low. I think it's difficult for so many countries to coordinate and restrict in that way. Again, the way.
And also,
go ahead.
There is the fact that the US has a lot to win by backing the network, which is what is happening right now.
Correct, right. Because that's right. Some nation states are going to have a calculation of self-interest that's going to include an alliance, albeit temporary, with the network, right? And the United States, might be doing that to some extent. Now, some other countries might be doing that to some extent as well too.
Yes. Especially countries that have nothing to lose, like El Salvador,
exactly,
Bhutan, and
exactly. And to me, exactly, that's where I see the value proposition. I mean, I think Inverted asked this earlier. This is where I see the value proposition for the small, weak country. Okay, it's as a safe haven for people who want to access the network. Okay, if you take just a hypothetical where let's say the major countries, the countries that have strong enforcement networks, are banding together, trying to band together, and they've identified the network and the internet, unfettered access to the internet as a threat. They're banding together. They want to stop it, right? Well, a person that wants to access that is going to have a physical safe haven, a physical someplace where they can park their toches and be able to access the internet for commerce and speech, right? That's a service that small, weak countries can provide, right? That's something, and in fact, that might be the best thing that they can actually, the most valuable thing, I would say, that potentially that they can provide. So, to me, and again, like I said, I'm a citizenship and immigration lawyer. People see things through the lens, kind of, I guess, of what they focus on the most. I see this through my lens, which is the key thing is to be able to access the network. You have to be able to move if the nation state that you're in physically or associated with or has some leverage over you decides to act against you, right? So Olivier, in your case, if Dubai said tomorrow, we don't like this type of content that you're producing, or we don't like your company or whatever, for you to continue in what you're doing, you'd have to be able to pick up and physically leave, go to a jurisdiction where you're not going to be criminalized for doing it. Or, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way you could do it if you want to stay white market. If you want to stay black market, obviously you could dig your heels into Dubai and try to do this surreptitiously. But the ability to move is what I see as the key. And I say this. I mean, my logo is my motto is freedom of movement is the answer. And I even distinguish between freedom of movement and the movement itself. I actually think it's the ability to do so that's actually key, more so than the actual movement. Or you have to be able to, right? That's what it is. Able enough, of course, willing. There's a psychological aspect to it as well, too, right? People have inertia if they've never moved in their life, and it's difficult. But assuming they have the willingness to do so, it's got to be, at least in this system that we're in right now, while the nation state is entering its, I don't, maybe it's too far to say death throes, but let's say in this struggle coming in the next few decades, which is going to be rough, people have to be able to move if necessary in order to preserve that access to the ever powerful network.
Yeah, it's really very important. You cannot. I mean, the network is going to lend you a part of its very powerful powers, but for this, you need to be able to move.
Harvey, do you think it's fair to say that the just move option is less of an option on a relative scale the more of a public figure a person is?
Um, can you expound on what you mean a little bit?
Well, like Elon has powers to, and maybe Elon isn't the best example because he can write a big check too. But like let's say Pavel Durov, the Frenchman, the Telegraph founder, um, he has a lot of. I mean, he has a very big checkbook and a lot of clout compared to any mortal, and yet he finds himself in a situation where he's now only able to travel between two places and really has his rights quite constricted. I think most of us would argue. So it's not like, oh well, he has another passport, he can just go somewhere else. Like, I guess he probably could, like, let's say he had Chinese citizenship, I'm sure he could fly to China, and like they're not gonna, no, China's probably not gonna extradite him, although maybe. um but he would lose control of assets. He would lose control of his bank account. Like, he there is a consequence to choosing the just move option that you and I really would not have to consider, were you and I to feel the need to, grab our go bag and run out the door, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So Pavel Durov's already in some sort of legal trouble right now. It's once you've triggered investigation or charges by the state, right? Your options constrict to basically escape that by physical relocation. I would still argue that he would be better off having more places to go, even if he wants to abscond. But what I'm referring to more is trying to basically pick and choose the laws that you're subject to. That in today's day and age, the nation state primarily assert jurisdiction in just one of a few ways. One, by virtue of physical presence within the boundaries. Two, on their citizens abroad and sometimes legal permanent residents. And then also, three, increasingly, although this is more difficult, by conduct that they perceive flows into their country, even if you're physically outside of the country when you're there, right? The first two, you can opt out. I mean, you can leave. I call physically leaving a country the shallow exit, and I call relinquishing citizenship the deep exit. Right. These are two ways that currently the way nation state law works and the way they what's kind of generally accepted. These are two ways to kind of opt out of being subject to certain laws. Now, number three, you have to obviously, narrow down or shape your conduct such a way to try to avoid domestic nation state law or by virtue of doing something that they think flows into that country. I think that third paradigm is going to shift. It's not workable nowadays. Okay, we cannot, we're in this weird position right now where when you speak online, you speak on X. Okay, let's say you make a post. Okay, what nation state speech laws are you subject to? Are you just subject to the country that where you're physically located? Are you just subject to the law of the country which has the servers for X, or are you subject to anywhere that speech goes, anywhere people access that speech from X? Right now, there's a battle shaping up between the United Kingdom regulators, Ofcom, because they enacted the Online Safety Act, and they're implementing the provisions, and they're sending regulatory demand letters to U.S. companies, okay, to websites that are based in the United States, because people in the UK access that information. I don't think this can hold. I don't think this can be static. Okay, where there's such confusion and just 190 plus some countries trying to make a claim for being able to subject people who speak online to their laws. So what I'm referring to as far as being able to move around, I'm talking about primarily, I mean, before you actually are, being prosecuted by a nation state, right? So if you know that you're gonna, you want to have a company like Telegram, right? Let's say Pavel Durov, if he had to do this all, if he had to do this all over again, right? He can try to shape his life, to narrow his liability, right? He could try to say, okay, well, I'm gonna not be physically located in the country that's antagonistic to this type of messaging service, and I'm also not going to be citizen in a country that exerts extraterritorial jurisdictions over its citizens for this type of behavior. And I think we're going to see that happen. That might sound like it's kind of tough or impossible to do because nowadays most people have one citizenship or maybe two. But if you fast forward to a world where people have 3, 4, 5 citizenships and the nation states themselves are generally weaker, that arbitrage game, that hopscotch game of not just where you are physically located, but where you actually subject yourself to jurisdiction, it's a lot more plausible. It's a lot more doable, and I think that's what we're going to see. Now going back to Durov, I mean, yeah, I mean he's, you know, if he were to hypothetically, if he were to be able to escape to a country that's not France, right? France could obviously try to extradite him, and maybe he would end up in a Carlos Ghosn situation, okay, where he's dug his heels in and trying to fight extradition. That's not a great position to be in. It's not great at all. It's probably still better than rotting in a prison, right? As I would say, you're better off in a third world mansion than in a first world prison. But just to be clear for everybody out there, what I'm referring to as far as the freedom of movement, I'm kind of referring to before you actually get into the legal trouble.
Yeah, but
Oh,
just to follow up on that really quick. I more specifically meant that, like, and if you disagree, I'm certainly not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think I'm of the opinion that, like, when you become enough of a public figure, and then, like, if we want to go back to Durov, like, it's difficult for me to say what he actually did wrong. And, like, when you become enough of somebody, it feels like a nation state can pretty much just point at you and say, hey, you did something wrong, now come prove your innocence, in a way, and perhaps even if you're not their citizen. So, okay, then the natural response would be great. So now you're not going to go to any nation that you think has an issue with your type of company speech, etc. And then to your point, we get to absurdities, and this needs to be dealt with clearly.
Oh yeah, I would
So,
agree. The more wealthy, the more well-known, the more of a potential target. I certainly think it's possible for nation states, or we're talking about nation states largely as kind of monoliths in this conversation, but of course they're not. There are also competing sub-entities that are not coordinating even within a single nation state. IRS versus Congress versus whatever. And yeah, I certainly think that nation states, or sometimes entities within nation states, start to see these big, wealthy, powerful people as competitors. I mean, they start exerting influence that's so high that it's on the level of a nation state. So yeah, I mean that is another issue and another unique issue. I don't know if that's kind of what you're addressing, Inverted, but I think I agree with you.
if I may, I speak about this in my book, and basically you can study history, because what helped really Protestantism to fight against the church, which was very powerful back then, is like a few princes of the Holy German Empire basically gave safe harbor to the most influential Protestants back in the days. And it's one of the predictions I make in my book. I think one of the countries that we spoke about today that have nothing to lose, like El Salvador, that will side with the network, will offer diplomatic immunity to the most prominent humans incarnation of the network. So El Salvador could reach to Pavel Durov and say, "Hey, we've heard of your problems with France. We want to give you safe harbor in our country, and we'll make you ambassador or whatever. So you will have, we'll extend our state protections to you." This is something that could happen, and I mean, in a way, Elon Musk already has it, because imagine Elon Musk going to France and the UK. Do you really think the UK administration or the French administration will dare to arrest Elon Musk right now?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean,
Well, I don't
no.
think they will, because
Okay, but hang on. What if Trump wasn't president? I bet
yeah,
you if it was
that's
a
my
different
point.
president.
That's my point. Exactly. Right now, Elon Musk is too powerful, because even though they had a third, and right now, I mean, they were not friends, but now they seems to be friends again. But anyway, Elon Musk is very influential in the current Trump administration, and clearly, if he would be arrested in France or the UK, the US administration will fight to make him free, and I think the US administration will win. My point is, states will lie with this kind of key people. And the problem with Durov is he's Russian, but he left Russia and now he lives in the UAE, which is not very powerful, right? But I'm sure if Durov would say, "Okay, fuck you, France, I'm not coming back. I'm just," he could live the rest of his life in the UAE, and the UAE will never extradite him. I mean, never, not in the next 10 or 20 years. But obviously, as you said, his mobility would be very restricted, right? So my point is, yes, you're right, but it's going to be solved because some states will ally with this kind of people. Imagine the amazing marketing El Salvador would have if they would offer this protection to Durov, for example.
So I could be remembering incorrectly. I just reread this story a couple of weeks ago. Maybe Parviz or someone remembers, but I believe it was with Nicaragua when Noriega was trying to be belligerent, whatever, and the CIA, the United States, essentially forced him out of power, and he went down to Panama, and I believe actually sought uh what's the right word? Safe harbor, let's say, inside the Vatican or some like third party consulate. And no, the US didn't go in and literally violate that, that immunity that the embassies have, but they literally sat outside and blared music and were just belligerent to the point that they drove the people insane, and they eventually forced him out and gave him up. Again, to my point before, it's like, yeah, how far is someone willing to push this? And I mean, no one has these answers. It's just an interesting counterexample to your point, which I agree with.
Oh, yeah, I don't think it's a counterexample. It's just another example in a different direction. But in any case, one of the big power of the state states is to fight against bottlenecks. Bottlenecks are like places where people have to go. Like, for example, it's way easier to control banks than to control the hardware wallet of millions of citizens, right? Or bottlenecks are also leaders. When you look at history, states, when they fight a mass movement, they always try to fight the leaders first because they are the bottlenecks. But states are completely powerless against decentralized movements. A good example is obviously the US won the battle against Napster, but they lost, and every state on Earth lost the battle against the Pirate Bay and BitTorrent. Every one of them, except maybe China. And so, yes, the leaders, I agree. The more public you are, the more fragile you are, the biggest target you are. And the leaders will need probably to make some deals with some states to be protected. But in any case, even if the states manage to be able to imprison the leaders and to fight them, they will be powerless against the mass who will use decentralized money, decentralized way of communicating, and satellite connections.
It's funny. It's kind of funny because this is almost like what would happen if there was no democracy. Because this is definitely not it's a democratic system at the network level, like you gave the example of Nepal. But the only reason that the nation states can't gang up on us, even though they could, is like the prisoner's dilemma thing, which it's like if you actually had a controlled vote, how would this necessarily play out among the nations? But since that never happens and there's this constant moving of the pieces on the board, what you're saying is obviously true, and therefore the network should win long term. You would hope or think.
Yeah, democracy on its own is not. It's not a worthy goal. It doesn't go far enough on its own. I mean, as the saying goes, 9 wolves and a chicken voting on who's for dinner is democracy, right? And sovereign
Absolutely.
individual, of course, addresses that point to some extent. There, you have, I believe, for freedom, individual freedom, you got to go beyond just what the majority vote for, right? Because you obviously end up with the tyranny of the majority. We've been going for an hour and 25 minutes so far. Olivier, what is the name of your book?
What is the what of my book?
What is the name of your book that you recently published? So we can put that out there and go buy it.
It's in French, so
That's okay.
the best. Oh, okay, but I mean, all right, it's tout le monde n'aura pas la chance de quitter son pays. But the best way to get access to my content is to go to my Substack, which is a translation of my book, Disruptive Horizons.
Okay, wonderful. Disruptive Horizons, and then also go search out his book if you feel like reading it in French. Okay, I actually have to go in just 2 minutes. This has been a wonderful conversation so far. I feel like we could probably keep going here, but Olivier, it's been an hour and a half where he's been speaking, and it's late where he is. I want to bring this home. Olivier, any last comments you'd like to make about this issue, networks versus nation state? And I'm sure that's an invitation to pack in like a million pounds of things into a 1 inch box. But any last things that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, like every period in humanity when you have a power who is losing its power and another one who is rising. I mean, not everything will be amazing, right? There will be turbulences and turmoil, right? But I think in the end, there is a real chance that it will give a lot of value to humanity. Basically, free speech everywhere, free access to information. And democracy can thrive in this new world. You can envision network states that are democratic to use like new technology to be able to vote on anything, and yeah, I'm quite hopeful for the future, even so it's not a given, and we will need to fight to preserve the freedoms that made the US great. I think we really have a chance today, if we play our cards right, to have the same influence on humanity that the founding fathers had, right? Meaning we could really help create or mold new form of governances that will be models for humanity in the decades and centuries to come.
Well said, well said. I want to thank Olivier Roland and all the participants. This has been a wonderful discussion. Check out Disrupted Horizons, as well as his book in French if you want to read that. Olivier's got a lot of interesting content on there. I know I already read a few articles. I know I'm going to binge a few more to see what he has to say about these topics. And just as a reminder, we are going to have our next Mobility Space number 41 on Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to put up a poll with 4 options. If you are interested, vote in the poll so we can choose a topic, and then we'll get right into it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Olivier. It's been wonderful. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. It was great to be with you. Bye.